iPhone 14 Pro Max, the highest tier offering in the new iPhone lineup. Also support for an always-on display for the first time on the iPhones. It's basically the lock screen with a dim brightness level and toned-down refresh rate to save energy. The design is quite a familiar one, except for our model's new purple color. The hefty build of flat glass and stainless steel is the same as before. The slight difference you may notice is that the camera bumps are a little bigger and taller to house the new main cam, but the phone's overall weight is still identical, down to the gram. The iPhone 14 Pro Max, of course, brings the full IP68 rated protection against dust and water, up to a depth of 6 meters. Just like last year's model, the phone is built around a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. It has a pixel density of 460 ppi, ceramic shield protection, and a 120Hz refresh rate. That fast refresh rate made its debut last year, and it hasn't changed here. It smooths out your swiping and scrolling, and can dial down to save energy, all the way to 10 Hz while the screen is on, and now 1 Hz for the always-on display. What has changed is the brightness. It's a pretty nice upgrade. We were able to measure a maximum of 830 nits with the manual brightness slider, but this can boost to 1,760 nits in auto mode when in bright sun, beating any of the competition by a long shot. The most hyped new feature on this display though is the pill cutout, which Apple calls the Dynamic Island. At first glance, it's just a black cutout housing the selfie cam and Face ID, but it's also integrated with the UI, extending on the left and right sides when you open a compatible app, like a music app, and displaying relevant info. It can also show system alerts, like charging for example. The Dynamic Island generally works for one thing at a time, but in some cases a second app is supported, and when you open that up, it'll split the Dynamic Island into an eye shape. Tapping and holding on the Dynamic Island's icons will open them up into a larger balloon window. Or a simple tap will directly open up the respective app. But that's not as big of an issue here as it is on the Pro model, as this screen has extra space to work with. Besides that, content is sharp, vibrant, and contrasty, and the color accuracy is excellent. And there's support for HDR10 and Dolby Vision as well. For audio, the iPhone 14 Pro Max has a pair of stereo speakers, with the earpiece acting as the top one. They earned a score of very good in our loudness test, and the sound quality is excellent, with clean vocals, sparkly treble, and pronounced low end. It's not a groundbreaking update, but there are a few new features here and there. One of the more notable changes is the lock screen, which is now also the always-on display. Swiping up will access your notifications. The screen is also customizable with widgets and wallpapers. And you can have a number of custom layouts that you can switch between on the fly. The lock screen layouts can also be linked to your focus modes. So if you're in Do Not Disturb, for example, you could know just by the appearance of your always-on display. The focus modes also have the ability to link to your mail and messaging apps, to filter your messages and emails right from the source. It has been improved a lot. One thing you can do is isolate an object from a photo or video by tapping and holding on it. Then you can copy and paste it, save it for later, or even drag it straight into an editor or a messaging app. And there's an emergency SOS feature, which provides several ways to request aid if you're in trouble. In some regions, you can even send an SOS through satellite, handy if you have no network coverage. Powering the iPhone 14 Pro Max is a new chipset, the Apple A16 Bionic, which is also found within the iPhone 14 Pro. It contains more power-efficient CPU cores, as well as more memory bandwidth for the GPU. There are also upgrades in the Neural Engine and the ISP for photography. And now there's a new display engine too. In benchmarks, there is a noticeable improvement over last year's A15 Bionic when it comes to CPU scores. And the iPhone 14 Pro Max tops the charts. The GPU performance is about on par with what we've seen before. Even so, that's still excellent. And when it comes to thermal management, the iPhone 14 Pro Max does a remarkable job. The phone displayed great stability during our stress tests. The iPhone 14 Pro Max has a 4,323 mAh battery, basically the same size as last year. The battery life is very similar too. While the screen on time is a bit better, the new model earned the same great endurance rating with the charger in the box, but we tested the charging speed using Apple's 20-watt adapter. With it, we were able to charge the iPhone 14 Pro Max from 0 to 48% in half an hour. Nothing but shift stabilization and full focus pixels. Besides that, there's a 12-megapixel ultra-wide cam which has a new sensor and lens, and like last year, it has autofocus. Then there's the 12-megapixel 3x telephoto and a LiDAR scanner for portraits and focus. Since the main cam has a quad Bayer filter, it bins pixels 4 to 1 to produce 12 megapixel photos by default. These photos are pretty much the same as what we've seen from the iPhones over the past couple of years. There's plenty of detail, low noise, accurate colors, and excellent contrast. The dynamic range is reasonable without going over the top. Our only real complaint is the foliage rendition. It's heavily processed and anything but natural looking. You also can shoot in the main cam's full 48 megapixels in RAW format. And compared to the full resolution modes of other phones with quad Bayer cameras, this one is probably the best we've seen. If you take one of those 48 megapixel photos and downsize it back to 12, the results are class leading. They're impressively detailed with natural looking rendition. Noise is nowhere to be found. Colors are wonderful, and contrast and dynamic range are on point. Too bad you need to jump through hoops to get there. The iPhone 14 Pro Max can provide 2 times lossless zoom by cropping from the 48 megapixel image. These shots look great, with an excellent amount of detail, even better than some